Hey guys, tonight we drift back to 17th century Kyoto, where the rainy season isn't just a weather event, it's a social performance. The streets are slick with drizzle, rooftops shimmer with a constant patter, and people shuffle quietly through the mist, cloaked in layers of cotton and silk. You trudge along a narrow alley, the air filled with the soft tap of sandals and the occasional splash of a wheel rickshaw dodging puddles. You pass by a tofu vendor hunched under a waxed paper umbrella. It's not just any umbrella, it's the government-approved kind, standard size, plain brown, ribs no longer than 12 sun about a foot, and tied with a hemp string to avoid decorative excess. You squint upward. There's not a splash of color in sight. Nobody's flaunting bold dyes or foreign shapes. That's not just etiquette, it's the law. Because in Tokugawa, Japan, even rain protection came with regulations. These rules weren't merely about style, they were tools of social control, wrapped in oiled paper and bamboo. If your umbrella had too many ribs, it was considered extravagant. If it was painted red and you weren't an aristocrat's mistress or a kabuki star, you were flirting with punishment. And if you dared to import one from the Dutch at Nagasaki without clearance, let's just say you probably wouldn't survive the paperwork, let alone the fine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere warm tonight, leave your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow that tofu vendor a little farther and notice how the umbrellas bob in unison, creating a sort of rhythm across the city. It's not just the rain you're witnessing, quiet compliance with one of the most bizarre aspects of Tokugawa law. Umbrellas in Japan had existed long before the 1600s, but this era marked a turning point. What once was a luxury for nobles trickled down to merchants and even peasants, but not without a bureaucratic toll. Regulations grew strict as umbrellas became more common, especially in places like Kyoto and Edo, where densely packed populations made visual order a form of authority. It's easy to think of umbrellas as just tools, but here they were treated like weapons of class confusion. A fancy umbrella might cause a samurai to mistake you for nobility. A poorly made one might shame your employer, and a foreign-style umbrella that could ignite a scandal in the local ward. You step past a low wooden gate and into a small tea house, where patrons gently shake the droplets from their compliant umbrellas and fold them beside the door never opened indoors. Of course, lest it anger the spirits or your supervisor. The room smells of steamed rice and wet wood, and nobody talks about the umbrella laws outright. But they're there. They live in the choices people make before they even leave the house. Historians still argue whether these laws were truly enforced outside major cities or just postured as threats. But surviving records suggest that informants occasionally reported umbrella violations. In some cases, fines were levied. In others, umbrellas were confiscated and publicly destroyed, usually with a bit of ceremonial flair to remind others not to get creative with their rib counts. And yes, rib count was a real thing. You lean back against the paper wall of the tea house and imagine an official scroll listing the acceptable umbrella, specs 8 to 12 ribs, plain paper, brown or black preferred. Decorative knots, only if you're a guild member. Tassels, only if you filed a seasonal variation form. At this point, you might be wondering how on earth anyone remembered all this. Well, most didn't. They just bought what the guilds allowed. Umbrella makers were required to follow the rules, and shops faced audits. That tofu vendor earlier. He probably bought his umbrella from a licensed craftsman who knew the law better than a monk knows his sutras. But not everyone liked it. There were grumbles. Merchants who had the money to afford more elegant umbrellas couldn't flaunt them. Artisans who wanted to push the boundaries of design were hemmed in by codes. And then there were those rogue umbrellas that occasionally popped up, smuggled in, home-modified, or borrowed from the Dutch. You step back into the misty Kyoto morning, the fog clinging to the hem of your robe, and see a courier darting by, his umbrella tightly rolled and strapped to his back like a sword. Even off-duty, even on the move, he respects the form. The uniformity is strangely calming, almost meditative. It feels like the rain itself is part of a rehearsal. A low bell rings from the temple quarter. You watch as monks shuffle out in pairs, their simple brown umbrellas echoing the color of their robes. Even the divine aren't exempt. If anything, their umbrellas must be the most modest of all. By now, you're starting to understand how something as trivial as an umbrella could become a symbol. It wasn't just about staying dry, it was about showing you knew your place. And in Tokugawa, Japan, knowing your place could save your life. You stroll along the rain-slick cobblestones just as a figure turns the corner tall, composed, dressed in the layered fabrics of the warrior elite, a samurai. But what catches your attention isn't the swords at his hip. It's the parasol in his hand. A pale blue waxed paper parasol with gold leaf edging. Not gaudy, not boastful, just enough to make a statement. This is no commoner with a borrowed umbrella. This is a man whose umbrella alone could stop traffic. In 17th century Japan, umbrellas weren't only about protection from the elements. For the upper classes, they served as walking billboards of privilege. Samurai and aristocrats wielded specially crafted umbrellas to set themselves apart from the swelling merchant class, who, despite growing wealth, were still officially ranked below. You watch him pause before a merchant's stall. The shopkeeper bows deeper than necessary. The samurai doesn't even shake the rain off his umbrella. He simply lowers it, briefly, acknowledging the man's deference before moving on. A flicker of theatrical superiority, perfectly legal under umbrella regulations. Historians still argue whether such class-coded umbrellas were enforced by hard law or more by social pressure. But the fact remains only certain materials, colors, and dimensions were suitable for men of rank. A parasol too vibrant could bring ridicule, one too plain, quiet judgment. There were even manuals that outlined appropriate umbrella behavior for samurai. Yes, manuals. Because nothing says warrior class like a book explaining how not to use your parasol like a rice farmer. You follow him down the street and notice others stepping slightly aside, not for the man, but for the parasol. It leads him like a herald, marking his presence before he even speaks. But here's where things get even stranger. By the mid-1600s, specific umbrella styles were unofficially tied to particular government offices. Inspectors might carry dark green umbrellas with lacquered handles. Local lords might have personalized tassels braided with their family crest. Some historians think these parasol identifiers helped prevent impersonation in public after all. Fake samurai were a real issue. And the folding umbrella, that one was contentious. Originally a Chinese import, the folding style was admired by many for its compact convenience. But the shogunate wasn't convinced. Folding meant portable. Portable meant personal. And anything personal, private, or convenient was a potential loophole in the system of control. So, for a while, folding umbrellas were discouraged or quietly restricted to high-status officials who had written permission. You weren't just buying a convenience, you were buying access to a gray zone. Naturally, the merchant class wanted in. By the 1680s, some wealthy traders were starting to mimic the upper class by commissioning decorative umbrellas in secret. The authorities didn't like this, not one bit. Laws started popping up across city districts forbidding the sale or public display of ostentatious parasol types to anyone without noble or samurai status, which meant that parasol snitching became a thing. Yes, there are records of neighbors reporting neighbors. Too many ribs, they'd whisper. Gold accents merchant. It got so ridiculous that some shops started selling discreet umbrella sleeves to hide forbidden colors while walking in public. Think of it as a sock for your umbrella's ego. You pass a group of students under an eave, all sharing one large umbrella. It's basic, practical, unbranded. No samurai would be caught dead with it. But for these apprentices, it's perfect. They're not breaking rules. They're simply invisible. That's one way to survive the system, just be boring enough that no one notices. Meanwhile, up ahead, the samurai disappears behind a folding screen, entering a compound lined with lacquered beams. And as his parasol vanishes from view, you realize it's more than rain protection. It's a passport, a signal, a badge, in a land of silence and order. Sometimes your umbrella speaks louder than you do. And yet, there's something beautifully absurd about it all. Imagine, today, being fined for carrying a designer umbrella unless you had a letter from your mayor. It sounds ridiculous, but back then, the line between law and fashion was paper thin. Literally. Back at the corner, you spot a small plaque nailed discreetly to a post. It outlines local umbrella ordinances. The characters are faded from years of drizzle, but you can make out phrases like ornamental edging, prohibited, and unauthorized lacquer use, punishable by fine. It's the dullest possible form of intimidation, but it works. The more you learn, the more it feels like everyone's in on a collective game. A ritual of quiet compliance. You see a peasant carrying a plain umbrella, no doubt borrowed. He walks differently from the samurai, stooped slightly, making his parasol look heavier. He knows it's not his status to shine. And yet, there's dignity in it, the same kind of quiet pride someone might feel driving a used car that still runs better than a new one. You pause under an awning and glance at the umbrellas lined along the storefront, like a muted rainbow, each one telling a story of class, caution, and clever conformity. The rain starts to let up, just a little, as you pass a narrow archway leading into a small side street, one of those tight, winding alleys where people speak in half-whispers and shop signs creak on rusty hinges. You're not here for the ambiance, though. You're here for something far more thrilling. Taxes. Yes, umbrella taxes. You wander past a tired-looking man hunched on a stool beside a wooden stand stacked with rolled umbrellas. His expression is part vendor, part accountant, and all bureaucracy. Welcome to the lightly drizzling world of Tokugawa-era fiscal policy, where even the rain had to file paperwork. At first, umbrella taxes were simple. A small merchant levy here, a fee for lacquered finishes there. But as umbrellas became more common, the government saw an opportunity. By the 1650s, officials had begun issuing formal licenses for the production and sale of umbrellas, and those licenses came with tax obligations. You examine a wooden placard nailed to the stand. It bears a stamped permit, and beneath it, a record of monthly dues paid to the local magistrate. And you think parking meters are annoying. The tax rate varied by region. Of course, in a place like Edo, bustling with upwardly mobile merchants and eager apprentices, the rate was steeper. In rural villages, it was more symbolic, more about reinforcing control than raising serious revenue. Historians still argue whether these taxes actually made a dent in national budgets, or were simply another layer of class enforcement dressed up as economic policy. But here's the twist. Umbrella taxes were occasionally tied to weather patterns. Yes, some towns increased rates during the rainy season. You imagine a town hall meeting. Well, Tanaka, the clouds are rolling in time to hike those parasol permits. It sounds absurd, but there are legitimate accounts suggesting that seasonal rain forecasts were factored into tax policy, especially in commercial hubs where umbrellas surged in sales like festival suites. And that meant the stakes got higher, because the more lucrative umbrellas became, the more tempting it was to sell them on the sly. You glance down the alley where a man is quietly exchanging a coin for a rolled-up item beneath his robe. Could be rice paper, could be sake, but you have a sneaking suspicion. That's an untaxed umbrella. The black market thrived on moments like this, especially in rainy seasons. Some craftsmen made unregistered umbrellas at night and sold them through backdoor channels. Others reused materials illegally, patching together parts from discarded umbrellas to skirt raw material regulations. And yes, umbrella sting operations were a thing. Records from Osaka mention patrols conducted by fiscal agents known locally as Kasa Bugyo Umbrella Commissioners. Now, whether that was an official title or a nickname made up by irritated shopkeepers is unclear. But the job was real enough: inspect, audit, and fine. You imagine a man in simple robes slipping into shops unannounced, lifting umbrellas, counting ribs, measuring diameters. It's the world's least thrilling cop drama. Kasa Internal Affairs. But enforcement wasn't just about sellers. Owners, too, could be questioned, especially if they paraded their umbrellas around suspiciously over-decorated for their rank, clearly foreign, or showing signs of unauthorized modification. So what did all this mean for the average umbrella user? Well, it meant thinking twice before buying one, and maybe a third time before opening it in public. You duck into a cloth shop to get out of a sudden downpour and notice the umbrellas hanging neatly by the door. Only 3 of them, each tagged with a handwritten number, indicating they were registered for shop use. Not for sale, not for gifting, just for rain protection. And yes, shops had to declare their rain gear. It became such a bureaucratic spiral that by the late 1600s, some businesses just avoided keeping umbrellas at all. If it rained, the staff got wet, but the accounting books stayed dry. Then there's the question of how all this was tracked. Without spreadsheets or QR codes, officials relied on temple registries, district reports, and the local nanushi, the town headman who often served as both community leader and amateur meteorologist. Of course, these records weren't always accurate. There's evidence that people bribed officials to underreport their stock or overlook a rib or two. In one known case, a wholesaler in Edo was caught paying off a registrar to mark folding umbrellas as window shades. Creative, if nothing else. Still, some tried to play by the rules. Guild craftsmen submitted precise paperwork. Umbrella prices were adjusted to reflect tax burdens. Customers received tiny stamped slips, proof of payment, just in case someone in a funny hat asked questions mid-rainstorm. But as you step back out into the drizzle, you get the feeling that, like most over-regulated things, it all functioned on a wobbly mix of enforcement, avoidance, and sheer cultural momentum. People followed the rules not because they believed in them, but because breaking them involved too much paperwork and possibly public embarrassment. And in Tokugawa, Japan, shame was its own form of tax. You follow the soft clack of wooden geta sandals until the street opens up into a bustling artisan quarter, where the scent of lacquer and fresh-cut bamboo lingers in the air. Here, umbrella making isn't a hobby, it's a heavily regulated profession, overseen by a guild as tightly wound as the strings that bind each parasol together. You step into a workshop just as the morning's rain picks up again. Inside, men and women work quietly, hands stained with dye and resin. Bamboo ribs lie in neat bundles on one side of the room, and sheets of washi paper, handmade, fibrous, delicate, are draped like drying laundry across wooden rods. These are not your average umbrellas. These are guild-certified tools of craftsmanship and compliance. During the 17th century, umbrella making in Japan became a monopoly controlled by officially sanctioned guilds, or zei. To open a workshop, you needed a permit. To sell outside your designated district, another permit. And to innovate, change materials, or tweak a design, you guessed it, yet another permit. The guilds kept production in check, pricing steady, and most importantly, style uniform. You couldn't just decide to start making your own line of funky artisan umbrellas on the side. That kind of rebellion might earn you a stern visit from your guildmaster or a formal complaint filed with your local Bogyo magistrate. Historians still argue whether these tight restrictions truly fostered quality or simply choked creativity. But most agree the umbrellas were stunningly well made. Even today, some museums house specimens from the Edo period that still hold their shape. You lean over a craftsman's shoulder as he carefully curves a bamboo rib, heating it gently over a coal brazier. The motion is precise, rhythmic like a prayer whispered through the fingertips. Each umbrella takes days to complete. Dozens of parts must be cut, shaved, dyed, dried, lacquered, and fitted together, and every stage is documented. There's a small wooden ledger beside the craftsman's stool. In it, he notes the number of ribs, the origin of the washi, even the name of the dye merchant. It's not paranoia, it's policy. Any deviation, even something as innocent as using purple dye from an unauthorized region, could result in a fine or confiscation. You glance at the finished umbrellas lined up against the wall. No two are exactly alike. And yet, they follow an invisible script. Subtle variations in handle carvings, tassel threads, or canopy curvature hint at regional identities, but all fall within bounds. Too much flair, and you'd risk being accused of aesthetic excess, a phrase Tokugawa officials love to scrawl in red ink. One umbrella in particular catches your eye. It has a faint blue sheen, almost metallic in the light. The craftsman notices your interest and chuckles quietly. Copper dust lacquer, he says, legal now, but 10 years ago, not so much. That's right, styles and materials occasionally rotated on and off the banned list, depending on trends, imports, and even superstition. There was a period when red umbrellas were forbidden in parts of Edo because they were thought to draw lightning. Historians still debate whether this ban was scientifically motivated or just a convenient way to squash a popular fashion among merchants. And then there's the infamous Umbrella Edict of 1686, a brief but hilariously specific ruling that limited the maximum diameter of umbrellas to avoid crowding public walkways. It was repealed after just one season when citizens complained of getting drenched due to insufficient coverage. You watch an apprentice apply a layer of oil to the paper canopy. It smells faintly of sesame and turpentine. This oiling process is what makes the umbrella waterproof, but it also turns it into a fire hazard. That'll be a story for another day. The apprentice pauses and offers a shy smile before tying a tiny knot around the umbrella's shaft. It's the final step. A bow, a stamp, a silent prayer that this umbrella will survive both rain and regulations. And if it doesn't, there's always the repairman, though. Whether he's guild-approved is another matter entirely. You step back into the alley just as a delivery cart rolls by, stacked high with finished umbrellas bundled in cloth. They're headed to the city's central market, each batch accompanied by inspection slips and stamped seals. One missing document, and the whole shipment could be delayed or confiscated. Because in 17th century Japan, you couldn't just make something. You had to prove it was allowed to exist. You continue down a quieter street now, the hum of the artisan quarter fading behind you, replaced by a gentle rhythm of raindrops on roof tiles. A pair of women pass by, both dressed in subdued indigo robes, each holding a paper umbrella dyed the same dull, muddy brown. You notice how they walk close together, umbrellas tilted precisely not to avoid the rain, but almost as if following a code. And in a way, they are. Because in 17th century Japan, umbrella color wasn't just a matter of fashion, it was a signal, a silent announcement of your social status. You could read a lot about someone just by glancing at what they carried over their head. Bright colors, probably a courtier's mistress or a kabuki actor off-duty. Monochrome, black or brown. That was your average merchant, tradesman, or peasant. Anything with gold leaf or a hint of violet, you'd better have a title to back it up. You pass a roadside tea stall where a lone customer sits under a red umbrella. Not a bright fire engine red, mind you, but a softer, almost brick tone. Even so, it catches the eye like a splash of forbidden ink on a legal scroll. You can't help but stare. Is he someone important, or just someone with enough nerve to fake it? Historians still argue whether these color restrictions were formally written into law or more a matter of unspoken sumptuary tradition. But documents from the period do describe various proclamations that limited ornamentation across multiple personal items, clothes, sandals, even umbrella dies. The purpose control through visibility. After all, color speaks before the mouth does. In a time when caste and class were rigidly enforced, the authorities didn't want ambitious merchants wandering around with crimson parasols and fooling commoners into thinking they were high-born. Social order, much like a well-oiled umbrella, relied on tight construction. And yet, the lines weren't always clean. You round a corner into a row of upper-class townhouses and notice a parasol hanging beside a doorway. Lavender paper, trimmed in black, the ribs extending slightly longer than standard. Subtle, but definitely not regulation. The owner, likely a lower-tier official pushing the boundaries of taste and tact. This kind of quiet rebellion was common. Some used foreign dyes to tint their umbrellas, just enough to be unique, but not enough to be fined. And when the rules got stricter, the workarounds got weirder. There were umbrella covers, plain sleeves made of hemp cloth that masked the real color until you reached a private gathering. Some umbrellas were even double-layered, like fancy onions, a plain outer layer for public use, and a more decorative interior for showing off once indoors. Clever, yes. Legal, not always. Then came the seasonal exceptions. Certain festivals or religious days allowed more elaborate umbrellas within reason. During cherry blossom season, pink umbrellas were tolerated. During funerals, white ones were expected. Step out of line, though, and someone might report you. Yes, umbrella tattling was real. Some neighborhoods even had anonymous drop boxes for complaints. Too much blue on Tanaka's umbrella. Saw a merchant girl with crimson trim. There were no cash rewards, just the quiet satisfaction of maintaining a rain-soaked hierarchy. You pass a bridal procession next slow, deliberate, dignified. The bride walks beneath a large white umbrella held by an attendant. This is one of the few times color rules are reversed. Here, white is not plain. It's symbolic. Purity, renewal, a clean slate. And it's the only time you'll see it used so boldly without suspicion. Behind the bride, her mother-in-law carries a soft gray parasol, still traditional, but with tiny floral imprints barely visible unless the light hits just right. It's a whisper of status, not a shout, exactly how it should be. You find yourself wondering what color umbrella you'd be allowed to carry if you were a time traveler dropped into this world without a title. Probably something beige, with one of those sad, stubby handles, and a stain from the tofu shop. But then again, maybe that's safer, because the more eye-catching your umbrella, the more eyes you draw, and eyes lead to questions, and questions lead to forms, and those lead to fines. It's almost comforting. In a strange way, this umbrella caste system, predictable, uniform, like rain that always falls straight and never sideways. You spot a child skipping along beside her father, her umbrella painted with faint traces of blue swirls. Illegal. Technically, yes, but children's umbrellas were often overlooked. A loophole in an otherwise rigid structure. After all, what's the harm in a little color, until they grow up and start a revolution? The rain has eased into a fine mist now, and the streets glisten like polished stone. You head toward one of the older neighborhoods, where wooden buildings lean slightly inward, as if huddling together for warmth. It's quiet here, too quiet, maybe, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're being watched or audited. And sure enough, Today's topic is one of the more absurd dangers of daily life in Tokugawa, Japan: umbrella-related fire hazards. You'd think something made mostly of bamboo and paper wouldn't need much regulating beyond style and class. But once you add a coating of flammable oil to keep it waterproof, well, now you've got a portable firework just waiting to ignite. Enter the Great Umbrella Fire Scare. You duck into a narrow lane and spot a faded bulletin nailed to a wooden post charred slightly around the edges. It's a fire warning from decades ago, listing several items forbidden in public during festival season. Right there at the bottom, oiled umbrellas may not be brought near lanterns or cooking stalls. Because in the tightly packed cities of Edo and Kyoto, one bad umbrella decision could take down an entire block. The oil used to waterproof the paper, typically sesame, rapeseed, or perilla oil, was effective at repelling water, but it was also, unfortunately, extremely combustible. Combined with the dry wood frames and occasional cloth trim, that's a spark away from citywide disaster. Historians still argue whether umbrella fires were as common as feared, or whether they were just the bureaucratic boogeyman of the day. But one thing is clear: the city magistrates took the risk seriously. During summer festivals, umbrella inspections became as routine as fire drills. Some districts even hired inspectors to sniff umbrellas for excess oil. You pass a small cart selling grilled rice cakes under a canopy of glowing lanterns. A sign next to the cart politely requests that customers leave umbrellas at the edge of the stall, not for convenience, for survival. And it didn't stop with the stalls. Firefighting brigades Haikishi were known to confiscate umbrellas during emergency drills if they were deemed too flammable. In fact, there's a record of one brigade ordering residents to puncture their umbrella canopies during dry season to reduce surface area, the umbrella equivalent of cutting your shoelaces so they don't trip you during an earthquake. You imagine a whole neighborhood of folks walking around with sagging, hole-punched umbrellas in the drizzle, trying to stay dry and not catch fire. Stylish? No. Safe? Debatable. Of course, some clever minds tried to innovate. There were attempts to develop fire-retardant coatings using powdered clay, fish glue, or even vinegar, but none of them stuck literally or figuratively. The coatings either washed off in the rain or made the umbrellas too heavy and brittle. Still, some took it as a design challenge. A few umbrella makers, especially in Kyoto, began creating segmented canopies that could be detached in case of fire. The idea was, if one panel caught a spark, you could rip it off before it spread. Not exactly practical in a panic, but points for creativity. You stroll past a shrine entrance, where a small covered bench offers shelter to worshippers. An old man sits there now, umbrella open beside him, not because it's raining hard, but because he's drying it out after a surprise shower. The paper glistens faintly in the lamplight. A sign on the bench says, "No smoking near umbrellas." Yes, smoking. Even though tobacco was relatively new to Japan in the 17th century, it had already become popular among samurai and merchants alike. Add that to the fire risk equation, and you've got one more reason for local officials to get grumpy. So grumpy, in fact, that there were occasional umbrella bans on certain festival days. Just like banning backpacks at a concert. Only wetter, you'd show up, see the posted edict. No umbrellas past this gate. Oil paper structures forbidden during high fire risk. Which made for a lot of damp but flame-resistant citizens. You wonder if people ever just said forget it and stayed home during fire season? Probably not. More likely, they just shared umbrellas, wore big straw hats, or got very good at dodging lanterns. By now, your own imaginary umbrella is starting to feel like a liability. Too flammable to be fun. Too decorative to be safe. Too tax-sensitive to be casual. You almost admire the stubborn resilience of the Tokugawa citizen, who just wanted to stay dry without being fined, judged, or incinerated. You look up. The clouds are thinning. A few pale rays of light pierce through, catching the rooftops with a silver glow. A couple walks by with a plain black umbrella, the kind that makes no statement at all. Safe, silent, unremarkable. Exactly how the government liked it. The mist lifts slowly as you follow a gently curving street toward a district known for tailors and lantern makers. The smells here are subtler glue, fresh fabric, a hint of ink, and the rhythm of the neighborhood has changed. No shouting vendors, no clatter of wheels, just a quiet procession of people moving from one shop to the next. Umbrellas in hand like silent flags of identity. You're about to witness one of the oddest intersections in fashion history, the moment when umbrellas fell under the same rules as silk robes, gold jewelry, and even hairstyle choices. Welcome to the world of Tokugawa sumptuary laws. You step into a covered market where rows of garments hang beside tools and accessories. And there, displayed just beside a stack of sandals, are 5 umbrellas, all brown, all identical, all soul-crushingly compliant. You reach out to inspect one, and a shopkeeper waves his hand gently. "Display only," he says. "We have permission for 6 on the floor." Because yes, even display counts were regulated. The Tokugawa shogunate, ever worried about disorder disguised as luxury, passed law after law limiting who could wear, own, or display certain types of goods. These were called kinrai, or sumptuary edicts, and they extended far beyond robes and rings. Umbrellas were included in these decrees not because they were dangerous, like swords or illegal literature, but because they were tempting, too beautiful, too expressive, too symbolic of upward mobility. Historians still argue whether these umbrella-related restrictions were formally listed in every iteration of the kinrai or simply applied ad hoc by local officials. But surviving documents clearly show that umbrella materials, decorations, and dimensions were cited as examples of goods inappropriate for one station. You wander deeper into the market and spot a tailor's booth with a lacquered sign explaining that all accessories sold comply with the latest sumptuary rulings. It lists lengths, dye sources, even approved shades of brown. Not just brown, correct brown. A few umbrellas are wrapped tightly, tied with hemp string that's rough and fraying. This isn't just a rustic aesthetic, it's regulation. Ornamental cords made of silk or featuring colored tassels were banned for commoners. Only certain guild members or samurai retainers could use them, and even then, only during specific ceremonies. You pass a group of students hunched over a hand-drawn diagram posted on a wooden column. It shows 3 silhouettes of umbrellas, each annotated with characters explaining what's allowed. One is marked for samurai use, with a longer shaft and darker hue. Another, labeled Common Merchant, has fewer ribs and a plainer topknot. The last one, blanketed in calligraphy that basically screams "Nope," is a frilly, foreign-inspired umbrella with metal tips and a painted floral pattern. That last one would get you fined, or worse, publicly shamed. Punishments for violating sumptuary codes weren't always severe. Sometimes, you'd just get a warning. Other times, your umbrella would be confiscated and ceremonially burned, a small but symbolically rich gesture. Burning an illegal umbrella was less about fire safety and more about erasing the illusion of privilege. You sit on a wooden bench for a moment, letting the strange weight of all this settle over you. Imagine living in a world where the thing you used to keep dry had to follow the same rules as a government-issued uniform, where function bowed to hierarchy, where even your rain gear was graded on social compliance. And yet, people found ways around it. Some commissioned umbrellas that looked plain on the outside but hid artistry underneath. Others hired skilled craftsmen to create detachable ornamentation tassels that clipped on after curfew, lacquer that could be wiped clean. It became a secret language of resistance, played out in water-resistant paper and bamboo. You pass a woman holding an umbrella that seems plain at first, but as the sunlight catches it, you notice a barely visible wave motif etched into the lacquer handle. It's subtle, legal, probably, but meaningful to her nonetheless. Because no matter how many rules were written, humans will always find small, quiet ways to be themselves. And in 17th century Japan, even under the weight of sumptuary law, even under gray skies and government frowns, people still managed to carry a little rebellion above their heads, one umbrella at a time. You cross a bridge now, slick with rain and lined with stone lanterns glowing faintly in the afternoon mist. On the other side, a bustling intersection unfolds vendors, couriers, school children, and merchants all weaving between each other like an organized ballet. And in the middle of this rhythmic chaos, you spot a scene unfolding quietly by the roadside. A city official, draped in sober gray robes, is confronting a young merchant. Between them, on the ground, lies a small, folded umbrella. This isn't just a conversation about litter. It's a full-on permit dispute. Because in 17th century Japan, owning a folding umbrella, especially the kind imported from China or modeled on Dutch designs, was a bureaucratic gamble. Unlike the standard oiled paper parasols that everyone knew and expected, the folding kind was compact, novel, and potentially subversive. The merchant shifts nervously. The official jots something down with a bamboo brush. The umbrella sits silently, guilty by design. You step closer and notice its features: metal pin at the hinge, cloth-lined edges, and the fatal detail, lacquered segments painted with a decorative pine motif. Not the kind of thing a rice merchant should legally own. These folding umbrellas were controversial because they allowed private convenience in a society obsessed with visible order. They could be hidden in sleeves, tucked under carts, carried indoors, in a world where umbrellas doubled as visual statements of class and station. That kind of concealability was deeply suspicious. Historians still argue whether the restrictions on folding umbrellas were part of an organized state paranoia or simply the natural result of a culture uncomfortable with collapsing boundaries, literally and figuratively. But one thing's clear: permits were required. You follow the official as he moves on, the young merchant quietly scooping up his umbrella and bowing repeatedly. He's not arrested, just warned, probably fined, definitely noted. A nearby stall-keeper mutters something under her breath and shakes her head. "Should have paid for the scroll," she says. Because yes, getting a folding umbrella approved meant applying for an exemption scroll, stamped by the local bugyo. It was expensive, time-consuming, and rarely granted. You duck into a nearby shop to get out of the drizzle, and the owner offers you a stool and a pot of tea. You accept, watching as he carefully rolls up the umbrella. He was using a classic design, plain and legal. But on the wall behind him hangs a different kind entirely. It's elegant, sleek, collapsible, a marvel of construction. Probably imported, though it's been modified with Japanese fittings. A quiet act of defiance, hanging like an unsanctioned painting in a gallery of government-approved blandness. He notices your glance but says nothing. Because talking about unauthorized umbrellas wasn't just taboo, it could be dangerous, especially if you were reported. In some regions, neighbors were expected to inform local magistrates about unsanctioned designs. Anonymous scrolls were slipped into wooden reporting boxes, often filled with petty grievances disguised as civic duty. Osano in House 14 carries a folding umbrella that does not match her husband's status. A courier seen on Lantern Street with a two-tiered collapsible parasol. And what happened if you were caught using one illegally? Well, punishment varied. Sometimes the item was confiscated. Sometimes you were made to appear before the Guild Council and explain yourself, which was just as humiliating. In extreme cases like flaunting a foreign design during a public procession, you could be banned from market access for months. Which, in an economy where word of mouth and face meant everything, was a social death sentence. You take your tea slowly, glancing out the shop window at the steady stream of umbrellas passing by. Not a folding one in sight. Everyone playing it safe. Everyone staying dry within the limits of tradition. And yet, you can't help but imagine a secret community of Umbrella Rebels people who folded their umbrellas just out of view, opening them in quiet corners, feeling the soft click of rebellion with every spring-loaded joint. You imagine what it must have felt like to step into the rain, umbrella in hand, knowing full well you were carrying a contraband convenience. It wasn't just about staying dry, it was about autonomy, about choice. And sometimes, in the Tokugawa period, that was more radical than a sword. The afternoon's rain has faded into a thin, steady drizzle, and the streets of the city are damp, reflecting the fading light. You've wandered far now, past stone bridges and rows of quaint homes, to a quieter, more secluded part of the city. The pace here slows fewer hurried footsteps, fewer clattering carts. People take their time here, and so do you. You follow a narrow path toward a modest shop, its wooden sign swaying slightly in the breeze. The smell of incense drifts out as you step inside. It's an umbrella shop, small, humble, but clearly well-loved. The owner, an elderly man with a thick, gray beard, looks up from his workbench. He's crafting a new umbrella, its frame delicate, the paper smooth and glistening with a fresh coat of oil. There's something meditative about watching the way his hands move. Precise, steady, and quiet. And in this moment, you begin to understand something deeper about umbrellas in this world, something not just about dryness or rain, but about tradition, craftsmanship, and status. As you look around, you see every kind of umbrella imaginable, all neatly arranged, oiled paper parasols, bamboo-handled designs. Some are simple, others ornate, and many are already reserved for special orders. Yet, there's one umbrella that stands out, an exquisite folding umbrella, hidden away in the corner, wrapped in cloth and tied carefully with a simple cord. You feel a pang of curiosity as you approach it. The elderly man notices your gaze and smiles knowingly. "Ah, that one," he says, his voice warm and gravelly. "A special order. It's for a noblewoman. Not the kind of umbrella you'd see on the street every day." You pause, taking in the details. The umbrella is constructed with care. The segments are perfectly symmetrical. The fabric a rich shade of crimson, decorated with faint gold floral patterns that catch the light just so. The handle is wrapped in silk thread, a design that would have been considered lavish, even by samurai standards. This is no ordinary umbrella. It's a statement, a personal expression. But in this city, such expressions aren't just a matter of personal taste. They're acts of careful navigation through layers of social expectations and rules. Historians still debate whether the obsession with umbrella decoration in Tokugawa Japan was about status or simply about aesthetics. Some claim that the beautiful umbrellas were a sign of wealth and refinement, an item so rare that it became a tool of visible social power. Others argue that they were a mark of rebellion, small acts of self-expression in an otherwise tightly controlled society. The elderly man continues, "People don't just buy umbrellas here, they buy their status. A common merchant might choose a plain design, but a samurai, they'll want something with a little flair. A folding umbrella, those are for the very elite. But even then, they must be careful. Too fancy, and they attract attention. Too plain, and they may seem unworthy." You realize that in a world governed by hierarchy and strict class divisions, the umbrella was more than just a way to keep dry, it was a negotiation of identity, a tool used to maintain the delicate balance between visibility and invisibility. As you take in the shop's atmosphere, you feel the weight of these social expectations pressing in on you. You're caught between the necessity of protection from the elements and the need to conform to a society's rigid definitions of what is appropriate for your class. The elderly man finishes tying the silk thread on the folding umbrella and sets it down on the counter. He looks at you as if considering whether to say more. "It's not just about the umbrella," he says slowly. "It's about control. Control over your image, your presence, your identity. The umbrella is the least of it. It's just a part of the puzzle." You leave the shop, the faint drizzle now feeling a little heavier against your skin. The world seems somehow smaller here, the weight of cultural norms pressing down on every corner, every decision. And as you continue your walk, you begin to understand something that goes beyond umbrellas. In Tokugawa, Japan, everything was about managing appearances. The right umbrella, the right hairstyle, the right kimono. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about control. And for those who could afford it, the umbrella was an elegant tool in the art of maintaining order, navigating boundaries, and defining one's place in the complex web of the Tokugawa society. As you pass a street vendor, you notice a small sign above a basket of umbrellas. It reads, "No folding umbrellas allowed." You smile to yourself, imagining the shopkeeper's stern face as he inspects each one. Just a small reminder of the way the world used to turn one umbrella, one rule at a time. You're back in Edo now, wandering through a narrow street thick with incense smoke and the murmurs of an expectant crowd. The signs ahead point toward one of the city's most popular kabuki theaters, a low, wide building wrapped in painted banners and decorated with wooden masks that grin down at you like old gossiping relatives. Inside, the theater pulses with energy. Actors rehearse in full costume, their movements precise and exaggerated, their voices rising in stylized cadence. But what really captures your attention isn't the stage or the silk-draped performers. It's the prop rack behind the scene's dozens of umbrellas, each one a character in its own right. Because in kabuki, the umbrella was never just a prop. It was a mood, a statement, sometimes even a plot twist. And in the world of Tokugawa umbrella regulation, this meant that theater troupes occupied a bizarre legal gray zone, technically bound by umbrella laws, but also given occasional leeway in the name of art. You spot one actor practicing with a bright red parasol, its paper panels painted with gold cherry blossoms that would have been absolutely forbidden outside these walls. He twirls it dramatically, snapping it open as he delivers a line about betrayal and honor. The audience, still settling in, gasps with delight. A parasol can be many things. It seems shelter, weapon, heartbreak incarnate. Historians still argue whether kabuki's lax umbrella rules were a result of official tolerance or simply the product of cultural loopholes. The theater had its own status, often looked down on by elites, but fiercely beloved by the common people. It was one of the few spaces where merchants and peasants could laugh at samurai, cry at love stories, and, yes, admire illegal umbrella designs without getting fined. You slip into a side seating area as the show begins. The first act features a traveling noblewoman, actually a male actor, as was tradition, whose umbrella is as extravagant as her embroidered robes. The ribs are tipped with silver paint, and the paper is a soft gradient from midnight blue to ivory. With each step, the umbrella becomes an extension of her character, mysterious, refined, powerful. And here's the twist: this parasol is meant to reveal her identity. Midway through the act, she tosses it aside, revealing a simpler, unmarked umbrella beneath. The change signals a turn in the story. The noblewoman is not who she claims to be. The audience erupts in murmurs. You can't help but grin. In a culture where umbrellas are so tightly controlled, using them as narrative symbols is both clever and culturally charged. The umbrella becomes a way to explore themes of deception, longing, and social mobility. You glance around and notice how different audience members react to the scene. A pair of merchants exchange knowing looks. A child mimics the umbrella toss. An elderly man silently nods as if he's seen this play a dozen times and knows the umbrella matters more than the sword. Backstage, Umbrella artisans often worked in tandem with costume designers, crafting custom pieces that walked the line between legality and flair. Some props were disassembled after performances to avoid accusations of excessive decoration. Others were kept hidden between shows, passed down like family heirlooms. Owning a famous stage umbrella could be as prestigious as owning a fine kimono. The most infamous kabuki umbrellas, probably the ones used in parody plays. You wander backstage and spot a weathered parasol tucked behind a curtain. Its paper cracked, but clearly once vibrant. This, you're told, was used in a satirical performance where a merchant pretends to be a high-ranking official by stealing a samurai's umbrella. It drew huge laughs and a visit from the magistrate the next morning. Because comedy has limits, and when it starts pointing out the absurdity of social rules, especially ones involving class and rain gear, the authorities pay attention. You leave the theater and step into a light rain again. The show's still echoing in your mind how the umbrellas didn't just shield actors from imaginary weather, but revealed truths, lies, secrets. It's easy to forget how something as small as a canopy of paper could carry such meaning. The streets outside are calmer now, a few theatergoers lingering under tightly furled parasols. Most are plain, but you spot a few bold stripes here and there, perhaps actors, or fans daring enough to blur the line between stage and street. You imagine a world where umbrellas were freer, more expressive, where people weren't fined for carrying a bit of beauty overhead. But then again, if everyone could carry what they wanted, the kabuki parasol wouldn't be a symbol anymore. It would just be paper. And that, perhaps, is the paradox. You're strolling through a lively neighborhood now, the kind with toys on display and rice crackers in jars where the air smells faintly of dried squid and ink. The rain has picked up again, but that doesn't stop the swarm of children darting between puddles like little paper boats, each one clutching something far more precious than candy or coins. Tiny umbrellas. Yes, even children had umbrella regulations, and if that surprises you, well, welcome to Tokugawa, Japan, where even your 6-year-old needed to play by the rules. You pause near a street stall selling simple toys, wooden spinning tops, cloth dolls, and, hanging from a string like decorations, at a festival miniature umbrellas. Not playthings, exactly, but real little umbrellas crafted with paper, bamboo, and even the occasional splash of legal dye. And yes, there were guidelines. The shopkeeper smiles as a girl begs her father for a sky-blue parasol trimmed in hemp string. The father hesitates. He asks, "Is this registered?" The shopkeeper, clearly used to this question, nods solemnly, "Approved last month," and that's that. Because even for children's umbrellas, there were limits. No flashy colors, no gold accents, no grown-up embellishments. Just the basics. Small, brown or indigo if you were lucky, tied with plain twine and built for light drizzle. Decorative flourishes were considered vanity even for 7-year-olds. Historians still argue whether the government truly policed child umbrellas with the same fervor as adult models, but records show that umbrella merchants were fined for selling ornamented parasols of inappropriate scale to minors. It sounds silly, but the logic was this: a fancy umbrella, even on a child, could signal wealth, and that could upset the delicate balance of social appearances. You watch as a boy proudly twirls a stubby little umbrella above his head. It spins like a windmill, flicking droplets into the air. It's painted with faint green waves, a design just ambiguous enough to avoid penalty, probably a gift from a lenient grandparent. And here's where things get a little more complicated. Because gifting umbrellas, especially to children, was both a tradition and a bureaucratic nightmare. A godparent or teacher might give a child an umbrella for a festival or coming-of-age ceremony. But if that umbrella didn't follow local edicts, that sweet gesture could come back to bite them. There are tales of gift givers being summoned by magistrates after a neighbor complained. Imagine explaining why your niece is strolling around Edo with a crimson parasol trimmed in stitched chrysanthemum. It was on sale wasn't an acceptable defense. Some clever families got around this by gifting umbrella tokens, instead little scrolls that could be exchanged at a licensed shop for a regulation-approved model. That way, the shop took on the liability, not too generous. You step around a puddle and notice two boys arguing over their umbrellas. One claims his has 20 ribs, while the other insists his is made from the same paper as a daimyo's. You can't help but chuckle. Class aspiration starts early. A nearby adult gently reminds them, 13 ribs max. Boys, that's all you're allowed until your voice changes. Of course, some parents bent the rules, just as they might bribe a tutor or stretch a cloth allowance. A well-connected family might commission a slightly fancier umbrella for a child and hope nobody noticed. The trick was subtlety. A polished handle here, a special knot there. As long as it didn't scream, "Look at me," it might slide under the radar. But occasionally, the radar turned up. There's a story from 1692 about a district official finding a teacher for distributing umbrellas to his students as a graduation gift. The umbrellas were unregistered, all dyed in pale blue. Harmless, really, but rules are rules. The umbrellas were confiscated and burned, and the teacher had to issue an apology scroll signed by every parent. You imagine the children, robbed of their gifts, standing solemnly as their forbidden umbrellas curled and blackened in the fire. A memory etched more deeply than any lesson. Still, not all umbrella tales were cautionary. Some were sweet. On festival days, children would sometimes decorate their umbrellas with seasonal motifs, cherry blossoms in spring, maple leaves in fall. Officials usually looked the other way, as long as the umbrellas were small, temporary, and returned to their drab forms the next day. Because deep down, even the most rule-obsessed magistrate understood this: children will decorate things. It's just what they do. You sit on a low wall near a shrine entrance, watching as a small procession of school children walk by in neat rows, umbrellas bobbing in rhythm like polite mushrooms. They are quiet, orderly. The umbrellas held just so. None of them stand out. None of them shine. And yet, there's beauty in it, a strange kind of elegance in the uniformity. These children aren't just carrying rain shields, they're learning how to move through their world, one regulation at a time. The rain begins to taper off as you follow a side path that leads you toward Osaka's old merchant quarter, a maze of narrow alleys and open-air shops, with the scent of pickled vegetables and wood smoke drifting between the buildings. It's busier here and louder. Unlike the restrained hush of Kyoto or the orderly calm of Edo, Osaka hums with a different energy: trading, bargaining, risk-taking. And among the sacks of rice and crates of textiles, something shadier moves beneath the surface: umbrella smuggling. Yes, you heard that right. Smuggling umbrellas. You duck behind a stall selling salted fish and watch a man quietly slip a long, cloth-wrapped object into the back of a cart. It's not a sword. It's not firewood. You already know what it is: a Western-style umbrella. Imported illegally, modified locally, sold discreetly. In a society where umbrellas are regulated more tightly than most weapons, the act of sneaking in unauthorized designs became a modest but persistent industry. And Osaka, with its thriving ports and independent-minded merchants, became the epicenter. Smugglers took advantage of trade routes through Nagasaki, the only port open to limited foreign interaction. The Dutch and Chinese were the primary legal traders, but goods often slipped through folding umbrellas, metal-ribbed parasols, even compact collapsible models wrapped in silk. Historians still argue whether the government truly feared these umbrellas for their foreignness, or whether it was more about losing control. A Dutch-style folding umbrella wasn't just convenient, it was unpredictable. It didn't fit into the codified visual language of class and behavior. That alone made it dangerous. You pass a shop where a merchant appears to be arguing with a customer in hushed tones. Something about a hidden panel and no more blue ones until the inspector leaves. You don't need context. The black market thrives on conversations like this. Some smugglers got creative. They disguised umbrellas as fishing rods or walking sticks. Others built double-sleeved models that could be passed off as compliant when inspected, but revealed flashy contraband details when opened. Handle carvings, illegal dyes, metal joints, it was less an accessory and more an underground art form. But the real trick wasn't just in hiding them, it was in knowing who to sell to. Discretion was key. A smuggled umbrella couldn't go to a peasant. Too risky, too visible. Instead, they were sold to mid-tier merchants who wanted to climb the social ladder or to theater actors, tea house owners, and courtesans who dealt in curated appearances. A finely made illegal umbrella could become a subtle flex. I move in circles the law can't touch. You spot one now, just for a second. A man in a traveling cloak, face half hidden by his hood, opens an umbrella with a dark green canopy trimmed with tiny gold flecks. It's the kind of thing no one should carry in public. And yet he does, just long enough to cross the street before vanishing into the crowd. You blink? Did anyone else notice? Maybe, maybe not. That's the danger and the thrill. But the government wasn't blind to this trade. Enforcement patrols stepped up in Osaka during rainy seasons, especially when foreign shipments were expected. Inspectors raided shops, combed warehouses, and questioned craftsmen. Some umbrellas were seized mid-sale, others were destroyed in public, as a warning. And yet, the trade never fully stopped. You pass a tea house, whose back room, so the rumors go, operates as a broker's den for rare umbrellas. The going rate for a folding Dutch parasol. 2 months' wages for a laborer. The kind with French silk ribs. Triple that, it's like an underground gallery for people who can't stop dreaming of rain in style. The most famous smuggling story, that'd be the snow parasol incident of 1698. A batch of ivory-handled umbrellas, supposedly meant for medical supplies, arrived in Osaka's harbor and were quickly distributed to a handful of upper-class clients. One noblewoman flaunted hers during a New Year's procession. The scandal erupted so quickly that the umbrellas were traced, seized, and ceremonially burned in front of the city gates within days. The noblewoman wasn't punished, but her craftsman exiled, his workshop dismantled, his tools confiscated and auctioned. Still, smuggling endured not because people were desperate for umbrellas, but because they were desperate for meaning. In a world where almost everything was assigned, dictated, or measured, a contraband umbrella was freedom. Small, portable freedom. You step into a narrow alley where laundry hangs like low clouds, and spot an old woman carrying what looks like an ordinary umbrella, but the way she holds it close, reverent, careful, tells you it's something more. You glance closer. The handle is wrapped in dyed ribbon, patterned with tiny cranes. You've seen that dye before. It's from Nagasaki. She catches your eye for a moment, then nods and keeps walking. No words, no smile. Just the quiet defiance of someone who refuses to get wet on someone else's terms. The rain returns as a soft whisper, pattering gently against the paper eaves and clinking off lanterns strung along the street. You're in a quieter quarter now, a place where the air smells like wet pine and grilled fish, and where conversations are held low, like secrets under layers of cotton robes. You're here to witness a ritual far older than the umbrellas themselves, one steeped in meaning, etiquette, and delicate social maneuvering the umbrella as a gift. It may sound unremarkable giving someone an umbrella, but in 17th century Japan, this simple act could carry a spectrum of implications: loyalty, affection, rebellion, disrespect, treason. You step into a courtyard where a formal gathering is underway. A well-dressed merchant kneels before a visiting official, holding out an umbrella wrapped in fine cloth. The exchange is slow and ceremonial. The umbrella is not opened. That would be improper. Instead, it is presented like a scroll, the offering of both an object and a message. Gift-giving in Tokugawa. Japan followed rigid protocols, and umbrellas like fans, swords, or silks weren't just handed over. They were chosen, wrapped, timed. An umbrella given during the rainy season might signify care or preparedness. The same gift during a drought, a veiled insult, or worse, a prediction. The merchant bows low. The official accepts the bundle without expression. Everyone in the courtyard pretends not to look, but they're watching. They want to see the ribbon color, the fabric choice, the merchant's posture, because everything matters. Historians still argue whether umbrella gifts were primarily acts of flattery or subtle political tools. Some say it was a status ritual, allowing merchants to curry favor with local lords. Others believe it was about aligning yourself with a patron, showing that you knew your place, but also knew how to please. And sometimes, things went badly. You walk past a shrine where a stone tablet records the expulsion of a local artisan, punished for presenting an umbrella to the wrong recipient. The recipient, a magistrate who saw the gift not as admiration, but an attempt to bribe. The umbrella had lacquered ribs, gold inlay on the shaft, and a discreet family crest worked into the canopy. Too many signals, too much ambition. The gift was burned. The giver was banished. But not all umbrella gifts were political. Some were deeply personal. You pass a small tea house where a couple sits silently under a shared umbrella. It's old, patched, well used, but the way they sit, shoulders touching, you know it was given with affection, maybe even love. A man giving a woman an umbrella could be an unspoken confession, a gesture that said, "I want to protect you, even when I'm not around." There's a term for this kasa no aijo umbrella affection. Young lovers would sometimes exchange umbrellas secretly, especially if they were from different social classes and forbidden to be seen together. The umbrella became a stand-in for touch, presence, shelter. Of course, this could also lead to scandal. One story from 1674 tells of a low-ranking samurai who presented an ornate umbrella to the daughter of a wealthy merchant. She accepted it, thinking it a token of courtship. Her father disagreed. The samurai was beaten, and the umbrella publicly destroyed in front of the family's estate. The girl was married off to a textile trader 3 towns over, and the story became a cautionary tale about gifting above one's rank. You watch a delivery boy now, carrying an umbrella tied with a vermilion ribbon. He's careful not to let it touch the ground. This, too, is a message. The ribbon signifies celebration, perhaps a birth, a marriage, or a promotion. The umbrella isn't just a gift, it's a public announcement. But not all gifts were welcome. You duck under an awning just in time to avoid a sharp gust of wind and overhear 2 older women gossiping. She tried to give him a green umbrella. One whispers, "In that season," she might as well have cursed him. Green umbrellas were unlucky during certain lunar months. A gift like that could be read as a threat, especially if the ribs numbered 13 or had pine motifs, which symbolized eternity, and, in some cases, death. Giving someone an unlucky umbrella could be interpreted as a wish for their downfall, and once rumors began, they were hard to stop. You return to the street and watch as a young man stands at a gate, holding an umbrella wrapped in indigo silk. He's clearly waiting for someone. The umbrella isn't opened. It's tucked under his arm, like a question waiting to be asked. A few minutes later, a girl steps outside. She doesn't say anything. She just looks at the umbrella, then him, then back at the umbrella. She takes it. And in that quiet moment, beneath a gray sky and 100 layers of etiquette, a silent story is told. The drizzle becomes a fine mist again as you follow the street toward a district once known for its scholars and scribes, men and women whose jobs were to observe, record, and, occasionally, meddle. It's quieter here. The houses are well kept, the doors thick, and the shadows long. You feel the kind of stillness that suggests listening ears. Because tonight, umbrellas aren't just shelter from the rain. They're instruments of espionage. Welcome to the secretive world of rainy day intelligence gathering in Tokugawa, Japan, where umbrellas didn't just keep you dry, they helped keep you informed. You walk past a man sweeping his doorstep with a wide, rhythmic motion. Harmless, ordinary, except he keeps glancing toward the corner, where another figure waits beneath a closed parasol, unmoving, dry as stone. Something's being communicated, though nothing is said. In a time when samurai plotted behind sliding screens and rival clans vied for influence under strict surveillance, the umbrella emerged as an unexpectedly useful tool. You could hide messages inside the paper layers, carve signals into the wooden shaft, mark ribs in a particular sequence, and most importantly, you could point, gesture, and signal all under the pretense of avoiding a bit of weather. Historians still argue whether umbrella-based signaling was officially codified or just the invention of particularly creative spies. But records exist of Metsuki inspectors of the shogunate using umbrellas to follow suspects discreetly. A long-handled umbrella could be held at a certain angle to signal direction. A dropped parasol might mean observe the left alley. 2 quick taps on the handle. Abort? It's subtle, elegant, and easy to deny. You step into a courtyard cafe and sit near a group of older men drinking tea. One of them opens an umbrella even though he's indoors. The others glance at it, then back at each other. Nobody comments. You get the feeling that this isn't just poor manners, it's code. The umbrella's position, the angle of its tilt, even how tightly it's wrapped, these are all whispers in a language you don't fully understand. But they do. You recall a tale from 1706, often dismissed as fiction, of a double agent who carried a set of umbrellas, each a different color and size. Depending on which he used, his allies would know whether a meeting was safe, postponed, or compromised. When he was eventually caught, he wasn't executed, just quietly reassigned. Too useful to waste. You sip your tea and listen to the rain hit the tile roof. It doesn't take much imagination to see how effective a prop like an umbrella could be in a world of closed mouths and watchful eyes. Unlike fans or swords, umbrellas moved freely across class lines. A samurai, a merchant, a monk, they all carried umbrellas, which made them perfect tools for misdirection. You pass another alley, where a figure waits beneath a hanging lantern. His umbrella is tightly rolled, tucked beneath his sleeve. The moment you approach, he turns away too fast, too practiced. You don't follow. You've read about assassins who used modified umbrellas to conceal short blades or hollow shafts to carry poisoned needles. Extreme cases, yes, but not impossible. In a society obsessed with appearances, an umbrella was the perfect disguise for something far more lethal. Some cities, for this very reason, began restricting umbrella construction to certified craftsmen who agreed not to incorporate foreign hinges or custom modifications. But black market options always existed. And so, the umbrella kept its double life, half protection, half plot device. You find yourself in a garden now, where a pair of scholars walk slowly beneath matching gray umbrellas. They speak softly, pausing by a koi pond. One taps his handle 3 times on a stone. The other tilts his umbrella slightly. It could mean anything. It could mean nothing. And that's the point. The beauty of umbrella espionage wasn't in elaborate gadgets or gadgets hidden in bamboo. It was in suggestion, in choreography. You didn't need to shout or scribble. You just needed to walk with the right umbrella, held the right way, on the right street, under the right eyes. And so umbrellas became tools of silence, of presence, of theater. You remember a story whispered in a diary from a Kyoto court clerk. The umbrella with 7 ribs, lacquered in plum color, arrived at noon. I understood what he meant. I left the gate unlatched. No confession, no proof, just plum lacquer and an unlocked door. You watch another man pass now, umbrella on his shoulder, humming a tune. He's no spy, most likely. But after everything you've seen, you wonder how many secrets have drifted through this rain. How many codes have passed between strangers, cloaked in oiled paper and bamboo. Umbrellas, so simple, so quiet, so perfectly unremarkable. And yet, they've seen everything. The mist thickens again as you wander into a quieter lane near the edge of the city, a place where shutters are closed early. And the only sound is the slow drip of rain from tiled eaves. The smell of wet earth mixes with charcoal smoke. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls, not a temple bell, a work bell. Time for repairs to begin. You're entering the world of umbrella clinics. Not hospitals for people, not exactly shops, either. These were tiny, often hidden workshops where the injured, the cracked, and the slightly illegal umbrellas of Tokugawa Japan came to be quietly, carefully restored. You follow a hand-painted sign, faded, crooked, barely visible. It leads to a shed behind a laundry house. There, an elderly man sits hunched on a mat, surrounded by ribs, strings, and tools that look older than he is. He doesn't look up when you arrive, just gestures toward the pile of umbrellas beside him. Some warped, some mold-stained, some clearly not regulation. This is the realm of the fixer. In an era where replacing an umbrella meant dealing with permits, taxes, and guild scrutiny, many people opted for repair, especially if their umbrella wasn't exactly official or legal or properly registered in district paperwork. Historians still argue whether these fixers operated with any kind of approval or were simply tolerated because they performed a necessary public service. After all, even government inspectors needed their umbrellas patched once in a while. And who better to do it than a man who could restring a bamboo rib blindfolded? You sit quietly and watch as he threads a new joint into place, his fingers moving with patient grace. There's something hypnotic about the way he works. No rush, no fuss, just purpose. You notice that one umbrella he's working on has 16 ribs, 4 more than the legal limit. But he says nothing. Neither do you. These clinics existed in every city, usually tucked behind inns, tea houses, or bathhouses. They rarely advertised. You found them by word of mouth, the man on Fox Alley, the woman behind the eel shop. These weren't rebels. They were survivalists, the quiet glue holding a leaky society together. And the repairs weren't always structural. Sometimes a fixer would swap out colored paper for something more acceptable, or rewrap a gaudy handle with plain string. They'd carefully sand down lacquer, remove floral prints, or mute gold accents, cosmetic editing to make your umbrella. Well, boring again. That's what people paid for, often as much as they paid for the umbrella in the first place. A fixer wasn't just restoring an object, he was erasing a problem. You remember the tale of a Kyoto merchant whose daughter received a beautiful crimson umbrella as a coming-of-age gift. It was too decorative, too bright. A neighbor reported it, but instead of burning it, they took it to a fixer. The canopy was stripped, re-dyed in ash gray, and quietly returned. The girl never opened it in public again, but she kept it by her pillow for years. Because sometimes, repair isn't about utility. It's about memory. You watch the man in the shed straighten a slightly bent umbrella shaft. He uses heat and a smooth stone to reshape it, then ties the ribs together with a fresh hemp cord. It's simple, almost sacred work. No questions asked, no judgment given. There's a quiet power in that, especially for those who lived in the shadow of rules. You glance at a basket by the wall, filled with old handles. Some are plain, others are carved with subtle patterns waves. Mountains, dragons. You pick one up, and the man finally speaks. "That one belonged to an actress," he says. "Used it in a play where her character drowned in the rain." You nod, placing it back gently. Every umbrella has a story. You realize. A journey. A set of hands that held it. A storm it weathered. A secret it shaded. You stay a little longer, sipping the weak barley tea he offers, watching as he repairs one final umbrella. This one is plain, fraying at the edges. A commoner's model, if ever there was one, but he treats it with the same care he gave the ornate one. No umbrella is beneath respect. You step back into the misty evening, your footsteps soft on the damp path. Somewhere behind you, the fixer goes back to his work, his lantern flickering like a quiet heartbeat in the rain. And all across the city, umbrellas are being unfolded, opened, carried, some new, some patched, some halfway illegal, but all held high. The road leads you uphill now, toward a quieter, more ceremonial part of the city, where trees lean in close and roofs arch like prayer hands. The bells are softer here. The wind carries the faint scent of incense and plum blossoms. And in the distance, you hear the gentle patter of raindrops on silk. You've arrived just in time to witness one of the most symbolic uses of the umbrella in 17th century Japan, the bridal procession. You stand beneath a wooden gate as a small wedding entourage passes slowly beneath a covered walkway. The bride is dressed in a pristine white kimono, face calm, steps measured, but it's what floats above her that draws every eye. A large, snow-white umbrella wide, perfect, pure. It's carried not by the bride, but by an attendant, carefully positioned to shield her not just from rain, but from the watching world. This umbrella isn't just weather protection, it's tradition, it's ritual, it's law. In Tokugawa, Japan, weddings were rigidly choreographed affairs, and umbrellas played a surprisingly prominent role, particularly among higher-status families, where symbolism was everything, and white umbrellas were the centerpiece. The color white, associated with both beginnings and endings, purity and mourning, was loaded with meaning. To see a bride walk under a white umbrella was to witness a transformation, one person leaving her old life, stepping carefully into a new one, sheltered by custom and ceremony. Historians still argue whether these bridal umbrellas had regional variations or were consistent across domains. Some sources describe them as wide and lace-edged. Others insist on plain white paper, free of any decoration, but all agree the umbrella was sacred in this context. Touching it without permission was unthinkable. Allowing it to get stained was a kind of omen. You step aside as the procession turns a corner and disappears behind a shrine gate. Another umbrella follows the mother-in-law's. Of course, slightly smaller, pale gray, discreetly trimmed in blue. It communicates status, yes, but also intention. This is not a day for ego. It's a day for quiet power. You remember a story from a merchant district in Edo, where a wedding was delayed because the bride's umbrella was mistakenly dyed ivory instead of white. The dye merchant claimed the color difference was due to humidity. The bride's family insisted on purity. The umbrella was burned. The wedding rescheduled. 2 weeks later, the same family commissioned a new umbrella from a different craftsman, who reportedly blessed the frame before even cutting the paper. That's how seriously it was taken. But the symbolism didn't stop at the wedding gate. In some regions, the umbrella was handed over to the bride's new household, stored like a keepsake, passed down to daughters, never used again. It was considered bad luck to reuse it for ordinary rain. That would be like wearing your burial kimono to the market. Of course, not every wedding had such grandeur. Peasant ceremonies might involve a single, shared umbrella, borrowed, patched, handed from cousin to cousin. But even then, the symbolism persisted. A bride without an umbrella, that was cause for concern, for superstition, for quiet gossip. You wander into a small courtyard garden where an elderly woman sweeps water from the stones. You ask if she's seen many weddings in her day. She nods. I carried my sister's umbrella, she says softly. Held it the whole walk. My arm hurt for 3 days. You ask what it looked like. She smiles, plain white, a tiny crane painted inside the canopy, just for her. You imagine it now how that tiny crane must have hovered above her, invisible to the world, like a secret wish, something no guest would see, but she'd remember forever. You walk on and pass a workshop with 3 white umbrellas hanging in the doorway. They're drying slowly, the paper's still damp from morning rain. One has a small slip of paper tucked into its rib, a family name, written in delicate brush strokes. These umbrellas aren't for sale. They're part of a lineage. You begin to understand that umbrellas, especially in the context of weddings, were more than accessories. They were heirlooms, symbols of continuity, of shelter, not from weather, but from uncertainty. And in a society where so much was dictated from above, that little pocket of tradition of white paper and silent vows was a rare space of quiet agency. The sky darkens slightly as the wind picks up. Another wedding procession appears down the path, the bride's umbrella gliding like a cloud over her head. You step aside once more, lowering your gaze, not out of obedience, but out of awe. Because beneath that umbrella, a life is beginning. You leave the temple district behind and head down into the bustling lowlands once more. The streets feel different now, busier, more chaotic. Umbrellas dart and jostle like koi in a crowded pond. The rain comes and goes in unpredictable bursts, like a moody composer playing with tempo. And as you walk, something curious happens. The umbrellas change. No longer the white ceremonial elegance of the wedding procession or the discreet gray of everyday compliance. These umbrellas are bright, big, unwieldy. Some have tassels, others lacquered tips. A few appear to be lined with wool. Most look like they haven't been approved by anyone in a long time. Welcome to the chaos of seasonal umbrella edicts. You duck under a tea shop awning and glance at a nearby bulletin board. There it is, an official scroll pinned under a smooth stone. The characters are crisp, the seal freshly stamped. It reads, Spring Edict folding umbrellas prohibited until first planting. Lacquered ribs must not exceed 12. Blue dye permitted through next lunar cycle. Yellow banned in temple zones. Simple, right? Not even a little. In Tokugawa, Japan, umbrella regulations weren't just static rules, they evolved with the seasons. Rain in May was not the same as rain in September. The way you sheltered yourself from it, absolutely not the same either. Historians still argue whether seasonal edicts were enforced equally across all domains. Some daimyo were notoriously strict, issuing umbrella updates like clockwork. Others couldn't be bothered, but in places like Edo, where visibility mattered, these rules were gospel. And they were exhausting. You pass a group of travelers bickering over whether their umbrellas meet the spring guidelines. One man insists that green paper was approved last year. A woman waves a copy of the edict, pointing to a clause about permitted plant motif dye work. The third just looks up at the sky and mutters, "Why not just use a hat?" You smile. He's not wrong. The complexity of seasonal umbrella laws gave rise to an entire cottage industry umbrella consultants. Yes, that was a real thing. Their job was to help clients avoid getting fined or publicly shamed. They studied edicts, knew when exemptions were likely to be granted, and most importantly, advised clients on what shade of brown was currently in favor. You enter a small shop that offers rain guidance. The shelves are lined with scrolls, fabric swatches, and bamboo samples. A young assistant greets you and gestures toward a chart that looks like a color-coded weather map, crossed with a religious calendar. Summer permits only 5 lacquered ribs, he says. Unless it's for shrine use, then you may have 8. But no red tips, unless morning. You blink? He shrugs. It's not that complicated once you get used to it. You nod slowly. It's exactly as complicated as it sounds. These seasonal edicts extended to nearly every aspect of umbrella use: size, shape, color, fabric, rib count, even the sound the umbrella made. A style that was deemed too noisy during monsoon months could be banned for disturbing temple ceremonies. And yet, people followed them, mostly. Because the penalties, while often minor, could be deeply embarrassing. A magistrate catching you with the wrong umbrella during a seasonal inspection might not arrest you, but he might make you surrender it in front of your neighbors. You'd have to walk home in the rain, drenched, shamed, and visibly scolded. You stroll past a carpenter's stall where a row of umbrellas hangs like drying fish. Each one is tagged with the appropriate season, month, and zone. One says summer market area only. Another, autumn, with written approval. And one bold red model reads, not for public use display piece. You wonder how many customers actually followed the tags, or whether they just rolled the dice and hoped the inspector was on lunch break. Still, not everyone resented the edicts. Some artists found inspiration in them treating seasonal changes as creative prompts. What can I make within the rules became a kind of design challenge. There's even a recorded competition from 1689 in which umbrella makers from different provinces showcased their interpretations of the approved summer motifs. The winner, a paper canopy painted with barley leaves, lacquered in a newly developed non-drip resin, completely legal, completely beautiful. You pause at a bridge where people are hurrying along, umbrellas tilted, rain falling again in light sheets. A woman near you sighs, flipping through a pamphlet she clearly doesn't understand. I just want one that won't get me in trouble. And that's the quiet tragedy of seasonal umbrella law. For something meant to protect you, the wrong umbrella could become a burden. Too large, too colorful, too loud, too soon. But beneath it all, the edicts, the paperwork, the shame it's still just paper and wood, held above your head, bracing you against the sky. The rain lightens into a whisper as you follow a winding path beyond the city, past rice paddies and low stone walls, into the rural countryside. The air smells cleaner here, mud, grass, smoke from cooking fires, and as you arrive at a sleepy village nestled into a fold in the hills, one thing becomes instantly clear. Nobody cares about umbrella laws out here. You watch as an old man ambles down a muddy lane with a red umbrella so loud it could wake the shogun. Kids splash through puddles beneath a striped canopy that would have been confiscated in any urban ward. A grandmother rocks on a stool, umbrella balanced on her shoulder, the ribs bent and uneven, the handle cracked, the paper patchworked with whatever she could find newspaper, maybe, or mulberry bark. This isn't defiance. It's distance. In the rural fringes of 17th century Japan, the shogunate's web of rules sometimes stretched thin. While cities like Edo and Kyoto were tightly regulated, villages like this lived in a different rhythm, slower, more forgiving, and often more practical. Historians still argue whether umbrella laws were ever truly enforced in the countryside, or whether villagers simply ignored them out of necessity. The truth likely sits somewhere in between. Umbrella laws existed, yes. Scrolls were posted at shrines. Inspectors could arrive, but most of the time, nobody came. And so people kept on using whatever kept them dry. You pass a group of farmers gathered beneath a thatched eave, sharing one massive umbrella that looks like it's been cobbled together from parts of 3. They grin, wave, offer you roasted chestnuts. One points at your imaginary umbrella and says, "Too pretty for this mud." You smile. It's true. There's something wonderfully honest about the umbrellas here. They're not fashion statements. They're tools. One has a handle wrapped in twine and fishbone. Another is flat on one side, likely crushed in a cartwheel and never fully fixed. But they work, and that's enough. Still, the law has a way of wandering in even where it's not wanted. You overhear murmurs about a recent visitor from the magistrate's office. A man in a spotless robe, boots that had never seen mud, and a scroll thicker than his sword. He came to check compliance, measured umbrellas, took notes, confiscated 3, and recommended fines. But nobody paid. Instead, the villagers pooled rice to send him on his way, full and drowsy. He left with a small sack of persimmons and a promise to return sometime next harvest, which, in village language, meant never, please. That's how enforcement often worked out here, less with confrontation, more with charm, food, and strategic forgetfulness. And yet, there was always a chance that things could change. You follow a narrow trail to a workshop behind a rice storehouse, where a young man is quietly crafting umbrellas, not the flashy kind, but sturdy, well-balanced tools with careful joins and oiled panels. He's self-taught, his tools handmade, his designs unregistered, technically illegal. He shrugs when asked about permits. No guilds here, he says, just rain. He admits he's been visited twice by traveling officials. Once warned, once ignored. He keeps a copy of the city's umbrella edicts tacked to the wall, but it's mostly for show. They like to see you pretending to follow the rules, he says, even if they know you won't. And that's the quiet balance of rural umbrella culture. You do enough to seem respectful, not so much that it interferes with living. Still, the villagers have their own codes. You don't carry a bright red umbrella to a funeral. You don't open an umbrella indoors because it draws bad luck. You don't borrow someone else's umbrella and return it wet. These aren't government laws. They're village rules, older, stickier, often harder to break. You sit by a roadside shrine as a young boy walks past with an umbrella nearly twice his size. It drags behind him like a kite tail. He waves to you, his smile missing a front tooth. His umbrella is patched with old book pages, the characters running in vertical columns across the top. It's ridiculous. It's perfect. You realize that in cities, umbrellas were about who you were. Out here, they're about what you've got: a scrap of cloth, a bit of bamboo, a dry place to walk under. And as the rain returns, light and steady, you watch villagers emerge from homes, fields, and sheds, umbrellas blooming above them like mismatched flowers. Nobody's counting ribs. Nobody's measuring diameter. They just want to stay dry. The air shifts as you descend once more toward a city, though not the bustling lanes of Edo or the winding alleys of Osaka. This is Kyoto, and today you've come to glimpse something rare, something ceremonial, something entirely wrapped in pageantry and control. You're about to see the shogun's umbrella. Not just an umbrella he owned. The umbrella, the one brought out for processions, for courtly appearances, for the briefest strolls when the sky dared to sprinkle on power incarnate. You arrive at a grand estate where servants move in silence, sweeping stone paths and trimming pine branches that don't need trimming. Inside, through a veil of bamboo blinds, rests a single object propped on a lacquered stand, massive, immaculate, and oddly intimidating. It is not carried, it is presented. This umbrella is not for rain, it is for spectacle. Over 6 feet in diameter, the canopy is constructed from the finest washi paper, bleached to a pristine off-white and glazed with a proprietary blend of natural oils rumored to contain powdered pearls. The ribs, 18 of them, far beyond the legal limit for commoners, are made from reinforced bamboo, each joint reinforced with gilded hinges. The handle is solid lacquered wood, carved with a discreet dragon motif near the base, and near the tip of the canopy, a tiny crest, gold, subtle, but unmistakable. You stare at it for a moment, almost expecting it to glow. This is less an umbrella and more a banner of statehood, a portable roof for a man who rarely walked without a retinue of dozens, the kind of object that demands a cushion beneath its stand. Historians still argue whether the shogun himself ever held the umbrella or if it was always carried for him, by one of several designated bearers trained in the art of ceremonial shading. Some accounts say the bearer's walking pace had to be rehearsed, matched precisely to the gait of the shogun, so the shadow would fall just right. It's almost comical, this choreography of rain aversion, and yet it speaks volumes. Because in Tokugawa Japan, the umbrella wasn't just a tool. In the hands of the shogun, it became a performance, a reminder, a moving symbol that said, "I do not endure the world. The world adjusts for me." You walk slowly around the stand, noting the tassels at each rib-end delicate silk in imperial purple, a color banned for almost everyone else. They flutter slightly as a breeze enters the room, whispering of processions long past, where crowds lined the road to watch a canopy float by, more important than the man beneath it. There are stories, of course. Some say the umbrella had its own storage room. Others that a specialist was hired solely to oil and rotate it monthly, to prevent warping. One scribe claimed that it was so rarely used. Birds nested inside it before one of the spring parades. That entry is scribbled out in the scrolls. Possibly true, definitely forbidden. And here's a strange little detail you might not expect. The umbrella had its own travel permit. Not the shogun, not the guards. The umbrella, if it moved outside the capital, its route had to be pre-approved, the journey logged, the bearers registered. More red tape for a rainshade than most citizens saw in a lifetime. You think back to the old man in the village, patching his paper parasol with old book pages. That was an umbrella for living. This is an umbrella for existing above the need to live. But here's the quiet irony. The shogun's umbrella likely never saw much actual weather. It was too valuable, too symbolic. It was brought out when there was a breeze of possible rain, carried with ceremony, then returned to its stand before the first real drop could dare to fall. In a way, it was the driest umbrella in all of Japan. You exit the estate as evening falls, passing rows of manicured trees and pebbled paths raked into spirals. You half expect to see someone polishing the umbrella's reflection in the water. And though you won't admit it aloud, part of you wants to steal just one look beneath that canopy while it's open. Just once. To stand where no rain falls. To feel, if only for a moment, like the sky itself was told to wait. But that's not how this works. You're just a visitor. And the umbrella that belongs to history now. The clouds are thinning as you leave the city's edge, the last drops of rain clinging to eaves and lanterns, falling now only in reluctant drips. You're walking along a dirt path lined with willows, the silence broken only by distant frogs and the occasional creak of a closing door. It's a good time, you realize, to talk about endings. Not your, of course, but the umbrella's. Because, like all systems stretched too tight, the elaborate, eccentric, sometimes poetic web of umbrella regulations in Tokugawa, Japan began to unravel, not with a bang, not with revolution, but with the quiet erosion of relevance. You pause by a stream and watch a fisherman balance his way across slick stones, an umbrella strapped to his back. Plain, serviceable, no inspector will stop him, no guild will fine him, no magistrate will care. That's how far things have come. It started slowly in the early 18th century. Cities grew, trade increased, people moved more, and with movement came change. Travelers needed practical umbrellas, soldiers needed compact ones, merchants needed to impress less, and dry off more. And the law, it couldn't keep up. You pass a shop where once a guildmaster might have ruled like a bamboo tyrant. Now, the door is propped open, and a sign reads, "New stock folding styles available. Legal now. Permits no longer required." The rules didn't vanish all at once. They faded, piece by piece, a rib at a time. Historians still argue whether the decline was deliberate, an unspoken loosening from above, or simply neglect. But by the 1740s, most umbrella laws were either ignored or quietly repealed. Enforcement dried up like a puddle in late sun. Inspectors stopped measuring rib counts. Merchants stopped pretending to care. Even kabuki stopped using umbrella motifs to mock the system. It was too easy. And then, one day, the umbrella just became an umbrella. You stroll past a group of children laughing under a shared canopy. It's patched, striped, definitely unregistered, but nobody minds. The sky is brightening. The paper is drying. You think of the shogun's ceremonial umbrella, collecting dust somewhere, its lacquer dimmed, its tassels stiff, still grand, still heavy, but now untouched. And you remember the wedding umbrella, the smuggled folding model, the patched village parasol, each one a story, a rule, a gesture. Now, all just tools against the rain. The spell has broken. The symbolism has drained. And yet, something lingers. Because even though the laws are gone, the care remains, the craftsmanship, the memory, the reverence for something so simple and so strange that a nation once built a whole bureaucracy around it. You take one last look at the road behind you, the winding path of ribs, oil, parchment, and quiet rebellion. The rain has stopped now. You don't need the umbrella anymore. But you carry it anyway, just in case. And now, your steps slow. The breeze turns warmer, and the final droplets fall, too soft to bother avoiding. You find yourself in a quiet field, the hills fading into gentle curves beyond the last rice paddies. A soft mist curls above the ground. The air smells clean sweet with earth and rain and the memory of cedar. In the distance, a farmer whistles a lullaby as he gathers up tools beneath a worn parasol. There's no ceremony here, no inspection, no guild badge, just life messy, peaceful, unmeasured. You sit, let your shoulders relax. Let the weight of stories, rules, and ribs fade gently into the damp air. The umbrella leans beside you now, closed and content, not as a tool of order or status, but simply as shelter. You close your eyes. The storm has passed. The night is still, and the rain at last has nothing left to say.